Good evening, church family. It's an absolute blessing and privilege to be able to worship with you in the house of the Lord. The title of my message this evening Is Jesus Welcome at Your Home? I went to a souvenir shop the other day and I read an inscription on a plaque that said, "Our house is open to God, friends, guests, and sunshine." And I thought that was such a pleasant thought. Would Christ be welcome in your home? Would Christ be welcome? Christ was welcome in the home of two disciples who lived in Emmaus. Luke chapter 24, verse 28 to 29 tells us that they approached the village where Jesus was going. They continued, though, to say to Jesus, who wanted to walk further, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." And so Christ went to stay with them. Christ, who revealed himself to be alive to those early disciples, lives today, and he wants to come into your home just as he came into their home. At the home of Peter, Christ healed Peter's mother-in-law. Mark chapter 1 verse 29 to 31 reads and says, "As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about it. So what did Christ do? He went to her, he took her hand, and he helped her. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. He also went ahead and encouraged, hope, and delivered those who were under the control of demons. Christ revealed who he was and what he came to accomplish. We also find that Christ was welcome in the home of Zacchaeus. Luke chapter 19, verse 1 to 10 reads and says, "Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. But a man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and he was very wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was so short, he couldn't see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and he went and climbed a sycamore tree. Since Jesus was coming that way, he decided to peer from that sycamore tree. But when Christ reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, 'Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today.' So what did Zacchaeus do? He came down at once and he welcomed him gladly. But all the people around Zacchaeus saw this and they began to mutter, 'He has gone to be with the guest of a sinner.' But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, 'Look, Lord, here and now I will give half my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times that amount.' So Jesus said to him, 'Today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost.'" Friends, in his home, Christ was self-invited guest who came to make some changes in Zacchaeus' house. Zacchaeus listened, he responded, and he rejoiced over the greatest changes that came about because of Christ's presence. The New Testament records 3 visits of Jesus to the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And there were most probably more of them, but today I want to focus on just 3. These 3 visits of the Lord to the home of his friends were typical, but they were also very significant. Jesus came to the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus on a special occasion when he was unexpected. So Luke chapter 10, verse 38 to 42 reads and says, "As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, 'Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister sits here while I do all the work? Or can you not instruct her to come and help me?' But the Lord said to her, 'My dear Martha, you are worried and you are upset over too many things. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. And so Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her.'" We know that Jesus was unexpected on this particular occasion, because Martha would have been ready. If she knew Christ was coming, she would have been ready. Perhaps Jesus was self-invited. Maybe he was a self-invited guest on this occasion, as the living demonstration of the grace of God. We can assume that Jesus invited himself into the homes of other people. By doing so, he could bring God's blessing to them. But perhaps Jesus had a standing invitation at the home of Mary. It would be a beautiful thing to think of if he did. The second aspect is that Jesus came to the house of Mary and Martha and Lazarus at the time of sorrow. John chapter 11, verse 1 through to 44 says, "On this occasion, Jesus demonstrated his resurrection power and called Lazarus forth from the grave, and he restored to him his life." Jesus came to the home in a time of celebration too. John chapter 1 verse 1 or 12 verse 1 to 3 says, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus has raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in honor of Christ. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it at Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of that perfume. Mary and Martha were preparing a feast for their friends, and Jesus was invited. It was indeed a happy time, and a festive spirit prevailed. Do we forget, friends, or ignore Christ in our times of celebration and happiness? By all means, we should invite him on such occasions. The purpose of Jesus' visits, Jesus came to be served, or not to be served rather, but to serve. Matter of fact, Mark chapter 10 tells us that Christ came to serve by giving his life. Jesus was not one to just barge in or crash a party. He did not intrude where he wasn't welcome. He would never ever cause embarrassment. If you think of the wedding in Cana, he provided wine for the guests so that the host would not even be embarrassed. But friends, perhaps Jesus came into this home to fulfill personal needs. He needed nourishment as well. Jesus was divine, but he was also human, so he could have needed to be fed. Of the 2 occasions when he visited, we read of him eating with his hosts. He needed friendship. He selected the 12 apostles in order that they might be with him. He needed encouragement too. He was aware his death was going to happen soon. The crucifixion would be a humiliating and painful experience. And the sign of the costly ointment that Mary poured on him was a special sign of devotion that would strengthen him as he faced death. John 12 says, "Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial." Jesus came in to love, to teach the loving ways of God. And Mary sat at his feet and listened. She listened to him preach. She had a sister called Mary, though, Luke tells us, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and said, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all this work? Tell her to help me." At some point, Martha learned who Jesus really was. And John 11:27 says, "Yes, Lord," she replied, "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." Friends, Jesus wants to come into your home to teach the loving ways of his Father. Jesus came in to correct and to rearrange priorities Martha had misunderstood. And so, friends, our lives would be more harmonious, more productive, if we would draw up a list of things that need to be done and arrange them in order of importance. In your life, what is of most importance? Is your family what is of most importance? How does your life reflect this, and how do you spend your time accordingly? Jesus came to express sympathy also, though, in times of sorrow. And John 11 tells us that Jesus came to bring power and new life. Jesus was welcome in the home of Mary, on the home of Martha and Lazarus. But the rich young man admired Jesus, but neglected to welcome him into the home of his heart. His priorities would not permit Jesus to enter in. Then we read about Zacchaeus, who left Jesus into his house and allowed him to change his whole life. The question is, what about you? Christ wants to come into your heart to be your Lord. In love, in power, he wants to reverse some things in your life and reorganize some other things. He wants to use, he wants to enrich and empower your life. Friends, is Jesus welcome in your home? And will you even let him in? Revelation chapter 3 verse 20 says, "Here I am, I stand at the door and I knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." So friends, this evening, my question to you is Jesus welcome in your home? And if you do welcome him into your home, would you allow him to reorganize your life? Would you allow him to step in and reprioritize everything that you have? Friends, it is my hope and my desire to have a home that not only welcomes Christ, but a home that lives and breathes Christ. May this be our challenge as well, to create these environments in our household. And I can tell you, a home where Jesus lives is a happy home. It's a holistic home, and it's a home where I definitely want to be. So may we welcome Christ into our home day in and day out. It's my humble prayer in his name. Amen.